My name is Kishore, and I'm here today to give you guys a brief introduction or an overview on DevOps. So let me start with the question on what is DevOps. So DevOps is a combining power of both development and operations. So when the development team and the operations team or the release team work together, that combining power is called DevOps. And the DevOps team or the release team and the development team have only one goal, have one common goal, which is have code deployed in minutes, which means that once the developer checks in code into the source control system or into the source repository, it's a job of the DevOps team to make sure that change, which could be a new feature or it could be a set of defects which the developer has fixed. So it's a job of the DevOps team or the DevOps engineer to ensure that the code reaches the customer or the production environment within minutes. So that is what DevOps means. And there are many companies like Facebook, Amazon, who have exploited this concept of DevOps, and they've ensured that they will release one minor update in every 24 hours or one major update in every 7 days. And Amazon has gone much forward by releasing a new feature or making a change in production in 11.6 seconds. So without DevOps processes or without DevOps tools, it is impossible to think about releasing to the customer at this particular rate or frequency. We also have companies like Netflix and Flickr who do 4,000 deployments per day, and Flickr doing close to 10 deployments per day. So many releases per day, so many releases within an hour, so many releases within a few seconds. All this is not possible without having a strong DevOps process or without having a strong DevOps pipeline. Let me move on to my next slide. So here I want to just give you an overview about what is the pre-DevOps era, what we've been doing, and how DevOps changes whatever we've been doing. This is just a repetition from the previous slide on the frequency of deployments. So what I want to show here is the differences between the waterfall, agile, and the DevOps processes. If you've worked in a waterfall environment, you guys know that releasing something to the customer in 9 months is pretty common. But if we try to do that today, if we try to release an update to the customer, or if we try to provide a fix to the customer, and if we take 9 months, that's not acceptable today. Customers expect fixes and new features. Sorry. Customers expect fixes and new features within minutes and days, and all this is not possible without having a stable DevOps practice. And from the waterfall model, we all graduated to agile, where we shrink the release timelines from months to weeks. And now with DevOps, what we are saying is that timeline which is there in weeks should still reduce to hours and days. So we have evolved from the waterfall model to agile and DevOps. So what I meant here is, I'm not saying something that is taking 9 months to release has to be released in hours or days. What I'm trying to say is, something that is taking 9 months to reach the customer. Let's say we are working on a waterfall model, and as a developer, I fix one defect today. After fixing the defect, it reaches the customer after 9 months. But that is not what we want in DevOps. In DevOps, if a defect is fixed or if a new feature is added to the source control by the developer, it should reach the customer as early as possible. So that is the frequency of deployments has increased, not the rate at which we develop software. So that is what I wanted to I wanted to mention in this slide. If you guys have no questions, I'll move on to the next slide. Mayur, do we have any questions?
No, we're good.
Okay, fine. Let me move on to the next slide, where I want to show you how all this can be done. Now we understand what is the goal of DevOps. We know what we were doing in waterfall model, how we graduated to Agile, and how we are evolving to DevOps. So the question now is, how can all this be achieved, or how companies like Amazon, Facebook, have achieved these kind of deployment rates? So the answer is very simple. It can be done in 4 different phases or 4 different stages. The first stage is to have a stable automated testing suite. So without automation, you can't even think about DevOps, or it'll be wrong to talk about DevOps if you have not automated your tests. Manual testing has very little place. I'm not saying DevOps doesn't do manual testing, but manual testing has very little space in DevOps. So first you need to think about automating your tests. And once you have a stable automation suite, then we need to start thinking about continuous integration. And continuous integration paves way for continuous delivery, and then we can do the continuous deployment. So when I say continuous integration, what it means is the code, build, integration, and the test is automated. There is no manual intervention. The build is generated automatically. The new features or the branches get integrated and merged automatically, and test triggers automatically, and the reports are published automatically. Once we reach automation till here, it means that we have achieved continuous integration, or the team is CI enabled. Once the team is comfortable with CI, once the team sees a stable CI process, gets the benefits out of the CI, the team can think about continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is moving one step further, where not only the testing is automated, but the deployment to UAT, or deployment to staging, or deployment to pre-prod, whatever terminology you want to call it. So deployment to pre-prod is automated, and once the developer does the checks, does the check-in, series of tests get executed on the code. It could be unit tests, it could be API tests, it could be a Selenium UI tests, performance, security tests, static code analysis, content testing. So depending upon your test plan and test strategy, you continue to do whatever tests you want to perform, and then deploy it onto a UAT or a staging environment. So if you have achieved this phase, it means that you have successfully implemented continuous delivery. And continuous deployment goes one step further, where the change in the form of a new feature or a defect fix directly gets into the production environment after a series of checks. The only difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is the deployment to production is automated in case of continuous deployment, whereas deployment to production is still a manual step in case of continuous delivery. So that's the only difference between the delivery and deployment. And companies like Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, they've all successfully achieved continuous deployment, and they reach their Only after having a solid automation base, once they have implemented successful continuous integration procedures, they did continuous delivery for a while and then did continuous deployment. So this is going to be the journey for any company or any team who wants to achieve success in DevOps. And I have another image here which depicts how DevOps is implemented. So I will start with the planning phase. So in the planning phase, a new feature is planned or a set of defects for fixing are planned by the product owner. Once the product owner decides what will go for a particular release, the development team starts coding it, starts writing code or fixing code in the new branch in the source code repository, and that branch of code gets built, gets integrated, and then gets tested, and then gets released to production. In the production environment, the new code developed by the developer or the changed code gets deployed, and that code is operational or it needs to be monitored for a certain period of time to check if there are any failures, to check for customer feedback, and based on feedback for the customer, we'll plan the features or the fixes for the next iteration. So this is kind of a loop, and it keeps on continuing. It's an infinite loop, and this process keeps on continuing as long as the product owner has features in the backlog or the defects to be fixed. I'll move on to the next slide. I just want to list out a few important tools used by the DevOps practitioners. In the earlier slide, I talked about the different phases of DevOps, like planning, coding, building, testing, deployment, operations, and monitoring. So in this slide, I've just listed a few tools from each area. I've listed a few tools for planning, like Jira, a few tools for managing code bases like Git and Subversion, a couple of build tools like Maven and Ant and Gradle, a couple of test tools like Selenium, JUnit, NUnit, a few tools for continuous integration, Jenkins, Hudson, Bamboo. A lot of people use Jenkins. A couple of tools for deployment, for containerized deployment like Docker, Vagrant, Puppet, SaltStack, Ansible, and Chef. A few tools for operational maintenance and monitoring like ElkStack, Nagios, and Splunk. A lot of people use Nagios. So what I'm trying to do is I've picked up one tool from each section or each phase of the DevOps lifecycle and put it on this slide. The goal is to not learn all the tools. It's not possible for or I would like to say it's insane to think about learning all these tools. What I would suggest is pick up your areas of interest or based on your roles and responsibilities or where you want your career to go. Pick up a couple of phases from this slide and then target only those tools, those standard tools which help achieve that particular phase. For example, I want to be comfortable in build, test, and deploy phases, the BDT phase. So what I would do is I would learn Maven, I would learn Selenium, I would learn JUnit, TestNG, Docker, and Puppet. So I would restrict myself to these set of tools. Let's say, for example, I want to become an operations guy, or I want to monitor production systems. I would learn ElkStack or Nagios or Splunk and Docker. I would restrict myself to only those set of tools. So it actually depends on what your career aspirations are and what you want to what you want to become. Based on that, you choose what DevOps phases you want to work with, and identify tools within that particular area. And these tools work on an on-premise environment, and these tools also work on a cloud hosting environment. Let's say a company is using AWS or Amazon Web Services. There are add-ins or plugins of these tools available, which we can link with AWS services and achieve whatever we want to achieve with DevOps. So Microsoft Azure offers certain services for DevOps. Google Cloud Platform offers certain services for DevOps. There is another cloud offering called DigitalOcean. They also offer a certain DevOps tools. So basically, it all depends on what cloud environment your product has already been implemented on, and how you want to fasten the deployment process. So what I would do is I would first assess the existing development environment, existing release process, and based on what is missing, or based on what gaps are there in the release process, I would fill in those gaps using some of these tools. So that would be my strategy of implementing DevOps in any organization. So before getting into starting learning the tools, it is always better to do a DevOps assessment, understand where the gaps are, and then fill those gaps by making either technology changes or process changes or team changes. So it depends what kind of problems you're going to solve. And I have another interesting link called Periodic Table of DevOps Tools. This was developed by a company called Xavier Labs, and what they've done is they've come out with a set of they've listed all the tools in the form of a periodic table. So these are all the tools available if you want to implement DevOps, or if you want to do DevOps. Currently, so many tools are available in the market, and as I mentioned, it's insane to start with the tool here and end with the tool here. It doesn't make sense. So identify what areas you want to work on. Let's say you want to contribute in the development and source code management, or you want to contribute in testing, or you want to contribute in deployment and containerization, or you want to do monitoring. So depending upon which area you want to focus on, it is better to identify industry standard tools from that particular area, and get started with learning those kind of tools. Okay, let's say.
Can you share the link to this with us?
Sure, I'll do that. It's there in the slide. Is it not there in the slide? If it's not there in the slide, I will share it. Do you want me to do it now or post the session?
Yeah, okay, I will take it off after the session. We can just post it in the link. Yeah.
Sure, I'll do that. So as I mentioned, you need to identify which areas you want to focus on, and pick up tools from that particular area and get started with the tools. So before jumping into the tools, I would want you guys to understand what the DevOps process is. Try to understand what gaps are there in your current release process in your current organization, and then try to fill in those gaps instead of directly jumping into tools. So with that, let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, so this slide talks about how DevOps is done at Microsoft. So Microsoft also follows a standard DevOps process where a set of developers or a team of developers check in code into the source repository, and at periodic intervals, the code gets built and gets deployed into a container image. So it depends on on your process whether you want to deploy it into a container or into a native server. So container deployment is picking up these days, and tools like Docker, Kubernetes, Docker Swarm. So these are the kind of tools people want to use to take the advantage of containerization. And once the container image is ready, it gets stored into a container registry, or this is like a repository where all the containers are saved. The QA engineer picks up the containers, does the testing. It could be manual, automation, performance, security, UI UX, depending upon your set of test cases. Those test cases gets executed, and once the tests are executed, the application gets deployed into a staging environment. From QA, the product moves into staging or UAT, and from UAT, after a set of approvals, it gets deployed into production. And anywhere, if anything is failed, let's say the source commit fails, or the build fails, or the image is down, or the container is down, the test fails, deployment staging fails, at any phase, if there is a failure, the pipeline goes back to the developer, and it again starts from building, testing, deployment, and before it reaches to production. And depending upon what kind of tests your product needs, you can increase your test stages or you can decrease your test stages. That is completely up to you and the nature of the product or the nature of the organization on how they want to do testing in a DevOps environment. I'll move on to the next slide. This is one of the implementation that we had done for an enterprise large-scale application. We implemented DevOps by first doing assessment service. We initiated an assessment, identified what their issues were, identified what they did well, what they were not doing well, and applied this kind of an implementation in their organization. So what this implementation talks about is we have a product owner who understands the business need, who understands the customer user stories. So it is the job of this guy to translate. It's the job of the product owner and the business analyst to translate those requirements to the dev team. The dev team, after understanding those use cases, try to understand the architecture of the system and convert those use cases or convert those user stories into code. And once those user stories are converted into code, the code gets checked into one of the source code repositories like Git. And after the code is checked in, the code gets checked out, built. We run automation scripts on top of it. All this is managed by Jenkins. And once the tests are complete, if the quality gate has been approved, the application gets deployed by using tools like Puppet and Chef. Now, the reason why people use Puppet is, let's say I want to deploy the application on 20 different servers. I want to deploy the new version of the app on 50 different servers with 50 different configurations. So it is easily possible through Puppet. You just have to write a very simple piece of code which which does the deployment on 20 different machines. And once the deployment is done, we can monitor on how the application is behaving by using a monitoring tool called Microsoft System Center. Similar to Nagios, Elkstack, and Splunk, Microsoft has its own monitoring tool called Microsoft System Center. So we implemented that to understand what are the features which are most widely used by the user, what are the top 10 issues or errors the users face on a regular basis, what is the regular RAM consumption, what is the CPU usage. So all these details are very much required to understand the health of the system on production. And I think I'm done with this slide. I'll move on to the next. I'll move on to the next slide. Here I just want to show you what are the benefits of adopting or implementing DevOps. The first one is, as we have seen, the number of deployments to production or staging increases after implementing DevOps, which means that it's faster time to market, and we can expect higher quality of our applications due to continuous testing. So testing is not done only after coding or only at the time of release. It's a continuous process. Testing happens on a regular basis. You can have an extensive test pipeline implemented using different testing methodologies like unit testing, static analysis, UI testing using Selenium, API testing, DB testing. So you can implement all these testing phases in your DevOps pipeline, which will ensure that the product which is going out to the customer, which is getting deployed in the customer environment, is of high quality. Another important advantage of implementing DevOps is you can do something called A/B testing, and without DevOps, it is very difficult to think about these kind of tests. What A/B testing means is, at any point of time in the production environment, there will be two versions of the application running. So let's say for example, there is a new feature. There's an e-commerce app, and there's a new feature which is single-click checkout. Let's say the company wants to implement a single-click checkout. So instead of the user navigating to 4 different screens to check out from the store, the company implements a one-click checkout, and they want to find out how this is helping the users, whether it is really helping the users or not. So what they will do is they will release both the versions of the application to the customers. They will release the application with the one-click checkout and the traditional checkout process as well. So at any point of time, both the versions of the application will be running, both A and B. And they will have the monitoring team or the operations team find out how many people are using or successfully using the single checkout, and how many people are using the regular checkout process. And if the conversion rates are better, let's say the single click conversion rate is better, so they will replace the feature with a single click checkout. Otherwise, they will roll back that feature and try to make some tweaks or adjustments or fix that particular feature, and again release another feature for A/B testing. So it is very beneficial for companies to understand the pulse of the customers, to understand what the customers are liking, to understand their behavior patterns, and based on that, they will release features to the customers. So we will traditionally we were not even able to think about releasing two versions of the application to the customers. We were struggling releasing one version of the application to the customers. But now with DevOps, we are trying to release two different versions of the application to the end users. And another important term is called dark launching. What dark launching means is any feature. Let me take the same example. We want to implement a single click checkout, and this particular feature, instead of releasing it to all the customers at once, we will first release it to 1% of the customers. And if the numbers are good, if the customers conversion rates are good, if more customers are using this particular feature, we will deploy it to next 5% of the users. From 1%, we'll increase it to 5% of the users, then go to 10%, then go to 50%. So this kind of deployment, which happens which happens in different stages, is called dark launching. And all these different strategies are not possible if we don't adopt DevOps. So these are the advantages of implementing DevOps. If you guys have no questions, I'll move on to the next slide, and which says thank you for giving me the time to present you my content today. And if you guys have the habit of reading books, I've just listed a few books here: The Phoenix Project, Accelerate, and Continuous Delivery. These books are really great. I've enjoyed and I've learned a lot using these with these books. So I recommend this group to read these books if you want to get more information on DevOps.
Thank you, Kishore. So we have a few questions for you.
Sure.
So first question, couple of questions we have it from Sunil Bhaskar, and he's asking like, what is the difference between Hudson, Jenkins, and Bamboo?